Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sarita Aircrew Official. Excited. Today, we're talking about TSA rules for senior travelers, and I know that title might sound a little intimidating. Chuckles. Trust me, I'm not here to scare you or make airport security seem more complicated than it needs to be. I'm here to empower you with information that will make your travel experience smoother, more comfortable, and honestly, a lot less stressful. As a 15-year flight attendant, I've watched thousands of senior passengers navigate TSA checkpoints, and I've seen so much confusion that could have been avoided with just a little insider knowledge. Size. The rules have changed quite a bit over the years, and there are actually several accommodations and exemptions specifically designed for older travelers that most people simply don't know about. Today, I want to share 10 essential TSA rules that every senior traveler should know in 2026. These aren't just random tips. These are the things I wish I could tell every passenger before they get to the airport. Let's dive in. Let's start with something that's going to surprise you. If you're 75 years or older, you actually get some special treatment at TSA checkpoints, even without TSA PreCheck. Here's what most people don't know. TSA has a program called Modified Screening for passengers 75 and up. I see this every single day, and so many seniors have no idea they qualify for it. What does this mean for you? Well, you're allowed to leave your shoes on during screening, and you don't have to remove your light jacket or sweater. This is a standard accommodation, not a favor. It's policy. Now, here's where it gets even better. If you do have TSA PreCheck, and I highly recommend it if you travel even twice a year, you get to keep your shoes on regardless of your age. You leave your laptop and liquids in your bag, and you get access to expedited lanes. For seniors, this combination is honestly a game changer. I once helped an 80-year-old woman who had been struggling to bend down and untie her orthopedic shoes at every security checkpoint for years. When I told her about the 75-plus rule, she literally teared up. She had no idea. The next time I saw her, she'd also signed up for TSA PreCheck, and she told me it transformed her travel experience. Here's my advice. If you're approaching 75, make a note of this exemption. Don't wait for TSA agents to tell you. Politely let them know you're 75 or older and ask about modified screening. And if you travel regularly, seriously consider TSA PreCheck. It costs $78 for 5 years, which works out to about $15 per year. That's a small price for significant peace of mind. Now let's talk about something really important: medical devices. This is where I see the most confusion, and it's critical to get this right. If you have a pacemaker, defibrillator, insulin pump, or any implanted medical device, you should not go through the standard metal detector or body scanner without informing TSA first. Here's the truth. Those devices can be affected by the screening equipment, and more importantly, TSA has alternative screening procedures specifically for this situation. In my 15 years, I've seen passengers try to rush through because they felt embarrassed about their medical devices, and it always creates more problems. Here's what you need to do. As soon as you approach the checkpoint, inform the TSA officer that you have a medical device that cannot go through the scanner. You can request a pat-down screening instead, which is completely standard and nothing to be anxious about. Now, here's what you don't need. You don't need a doctor's note for your pacemaker or defibrillator. TSA doesn't require documentation for implanted devices. However, and this is important, it's still smart to carry a card from your doctor or device manufacturer stating that you have the device. Not because TSA requires it, but because it speeds up the process and gives you confidence if questions arise. For external devices like insulin pumps or portable oxygen concentrators, the same principle applies. Tell TSA immediately, request alternative screening if needed, and know that these devices are allowed through security and on the aircraft. I've personally assisted hundreds of diabetic passengers, and once they understand the process, it becomes routine. One quick tip: if you use a TENS unit, nerve stimulator, or any device with wires, disconnect it before screening if possible, or let TSA know so they can inspect it properly. Clear communication is your best tool here. Okay, let's tackle the famous 311 rule, because this is where seniors often have legitimate exceptions that TSA agents should honor, but sometimes need to be reminded about. The standard rule is this: liquids, gels, and aerosols must be 3.4 ounces, 100 milliliters or less. All containers must fit in one quart-sized clear plastic bag, and you get one bag per passenger. We all know this one, right? But here's where it gets interesting for seniors. Medically necessary liquids are exempt from the 311 rule. Let me say that again. Medically necessary liquids are exempt. This includes prescription liquid medications, eye drops, contact lens solution if you're wearing contacts, and even things like liquid nutrition or oral gels if they're medically required. I've seen TSA agents who don't fully understand this exemption, so here's what you need to know. You must declare these liquids at the beginning of the screening process. Don't bury them in your bag and hope they get through. Pull them out, tell the officer they're medically necessary, and be prepared for additional screening. They may need to test the liquids or do a separate inspection, but they cannot deny them if they're truly medical. Here's a real example from my experience. I had a passenger in her late 70s who needed to bring a full bottle of liquid antacid because of severe GERD. She'd been pouring it into tiny 3-ounce bottles for years, which meant she never had enough for longer trips. When I told her about the medical exemption, she was amazed. The next time she flew, she brought her regular bottle, declared it, and had no issues. One caveat: comfort items that aren't medically necessary, like lotion or shampoo, still need to follow the 311 rule, even if you really prefer them. The exemption is genuinely for medical needs. This is a big one, and it's something I'm really passionate about because I see mobility device users treated inconsistently at TSA checkpoints all the time. First, the absolute rule. You are allowed to bring canes, walkers, wheelchairs, and any mobility aid through security and onto the aircraft. Period. These items will be screened, but they cannot be denied. Here's what the screening process looks like. If you're using a cane or walker, TSA will visually inspect it and may swab it for explosive residue. This is standard and takes less than a minute. If you need your cane for balance, you can hold onto it during your own screening and they'll inspect it afterward. Just let them know. For wheelchairs, the process is a bit more involved. If you can stand and walk through the metal detector with assistance, TSA will ask you to do that while they separately screen your wheelchair. If you cannot stand or walk, they'll conduct a pat-down screening while you remain seated in your chair. Now, here's what TSA agents are supposed to do, but sometimes forget. They must use extreme care with your mobility device. If it's damaged during screening, TSA has a claims process, and you should document everything immediately. Take photos if you notice any damage. I once witnessed a TSA officer roughly handling an elderly gentleman's custom walker, and I stepped in to remind them of the proper protocol. That walker was his lifeline, and it needed to be treated with respect and care. Don't be afraid to speak up if your device isn't being handled properly, politely, but firmly. Also, know this. If you have a prosthetic limb or orthopedic brace, you do not have to remove it. You can request a pat-down of that area instead of removing the device. This is your right, and any TSA supervisor can confirm this if an agent is unclear. Let's talk about shoes because this is one of the most physically challenging parts of TSA screening for many seniors, and there are important exemptions you need to know. As I mentioned earlier, if you're 75 or older, you can leave your shoes on during standard screening. But even if you're younger than 75, there are situations where shoe removal can be modified. Here's the thing. If removing your shoes would cause you significant difficulty or pain, maybe you have severe arthritis, balance issues, or complex orthopedic shoes that take several minutes to remove, you can request a pat-down screening of your shoes while they remain on your feet. You might also be directed to advanced imaging technology that can screen shoes while worn. I've seen passengers in their 60s and early 70s struggle to bend down, balance on one foot, and retie complex lace-up orthopedic shoes while holding up the security line. It's stressful for everyone, If this is you, here's what you do. Before you get to the checkpoint, consider wearing slip-on shoes that are easy to remove if you're under 75. If you must wear lace-up shoes for medical reasons, politely tell the TSA officer that you have difficulty removing your shoes and ask about alternative screening. Now, TSA PreCheck members of any age keep their shoes on, which is another reason I recommend it so highly for seniors. That $78 investment means you never have to worry about the shoe situation again. One more tip from my years of experience. If you do need to remove your shoes, bring a small pair of socks or disposable shoe covers to put on after. Those airport floors aren't the cleanest, and protecting your feet is important, especially if you have diabetes or circulation issues. This is where I see a lot of unnecessary worry and over-preparation. Let me set the record straight on what documentation you actually need for medications. Here's the truth. TSA does not require you to present a prescription or doctor's note for your medications. That's the official policy. Whether it's pills in a bottle, an EpiPen, or injectable medications, you're allowed to bring them in your carry-on without documentation. However, and this is important, I still recommend bringing a list of your medications and dosages, especially for international travel or if you're carrying controlled substances. Why? Because while TSA doesn't require it, it's helpful if questions arise, and it's essential if you lose your medication and need a replacement from a pharmacy or doctor during your trip. Here's what you absolutely can do. Bring prescription medications in any amount necessary for your trip. There's no limit on pills or liquid medications if they're for legitimate medical use. Keep them in their original labeled containers when possible, as this eliminates all questions, but even if they're in a pill organizer, you're technically allowed to bring them. I had a passenger who was carrying a 3-month supply of medication for an extended overseas trip. She was terrified TSA would confiscate it. I assured her that as long as it's for personal use and not for distribution, quantity isn't an issue. She got through security without a single question. For injectable medications like insulin, bring your syringes and needles. These are permitted. Again, no prescription required by TSA, but having the original packaging or a doctor's note can speed things up if an agent is uncertain about the policy. One important note: keep all medications in your carry-on, never in checked baggage. Checked bags can be lost, delayed, or exposed to temperature extremes that could damage your medication. Let's talk about something many passengers don't realize they can request: alternative screening through a pat-down instead of going through the body scanner. Here's your right. Any passenger can opt out of the body scanner and request a pat-down instead. You don't need to give a reason. If you have privacy concerns, medical devices, metal implants that trigger alarms, or you simply prefer not to go through the scanner, you can say, "I opt out," or "I'd like a pat-down, please." Now, I want to be honest about what this involves, so you're prepared. The pat-down is thorough. TSA uses the back of their hands and will check all areas of your body, including around the waistband, chest, and legs. It's done professionally by an officer of the same gender, and you can request it be done in a private screening room if you prefer. Many seniors choose the pat-down option because they have hip replacements, knee replacements, or other metal implants that trigger the regular metal detector. Instead of going through the back and forth of alarm, explanation, additional screening, they just request the pat-down from the start. It's actually faster in many cases. Here's what I tell passengers: the pat-down might feel invasive, but remember that TSA officers are trained professionals doing their job to keep everyone safe. If at any point you feel uncomfortable or that something is being done incorrectly, you can ask for a supervisor. That's your right. One tip: if you're requesting a pat-down because of a medical device, let the officer know specifically where the device is located so they can be particularly gentle in that area. Let me share some good news. Solid food items are allowed through TSA security without restriction. This is important for seniors who have dietary restrictions, blood sugar concerns, or who simply need to eat at specific times. You can bring sandwiches, fruit, protein bars, cookies, nuts, anything solid. I've seen passengers bring full meals in Tupperware containers, and as long as it's solid food, it's allowed. This is especially helpful if you have diabetes and need to maintain blood sugar levels, or if you have celiac disease and need to ensure gluten-free options. The restriction comes with liquids and gels. This is where it gets tricky. Yogurt, pudding, applesauce, peanut butter, hummus. These are all considered gels or liquids and must follow the 311 rule unless they're medically necessary. Here's a workaround I share with passengers all the time. Freeze your liquids. If you freeze gel packs or food items and they're completely frozen when you go through security, they're allowed. Once they thaw on the plane, you can eat them. I've seen passengers freeze yogurt, smoothies, even soup, and bring it through successfully. One important exception: baby food and formula are exempt from the 311 rule even though they're liquids. But here's what most people don't know. If you're traveling with a grandchild and have baby food or formula, you still need to declare it for inspection. My advice for seniors: pack solid snacks in your carry-on. Not only is it allowed, but airplane food isn't always suitable for special diets, and having your own food ensures you won't get hungry or have blood sugar issues during the flight. This is a technical one, but if you use a power wheelchair or mobility scooter, you absolutely need to know the battery rules. Most power wheelchairs use one of 3 types of batteries: spillable wet cell, non-spillable gel cell, or lithium ion. The type of battery determines how your chair can be transported on the aircraft. Here's the rule. Spillable wet cell batteries must be removed and carried separately if the wheelchair will be transported upright in cargo. Non-spillable gel cell batteries can usually remain installed. Lithium-ion batteries, which are becoming more common, have specific watt-hour limitations, typically 300 watt-hours or less. Now, I know this sounds complicated, but here's what you actually need to do. Contact your airline at least 48 hours before your flight if you're traveling with a power wheelchair. They need to know the battery type, size, and weight of your chair. The airline will provide specific instructions for your situation. I've seen passengers show up at the airport with power wheelchairs only to face serious delays because the battery wasn't documented in advance. This isn't TSA. This is airline policy, but it affects your entire travel experience. Here's my insider tip. Carry documentation from the manufacturer that states your battery type and watt hours. This single piece of paper can save you hours of stress at check-in and makes the process smooth for airline staff who need to process your chair for cargo. Finally, let's talk about identification, because this is changing and it's critical for 2026. As of May 7th, 2025, you need a real ID-compliant driver's license or another acceptable form of ID to board a domestic flight. If you're a senior who hasn't renewed your license recently, check the top right corner. If there's a star, you're real ID compliant. If not, you'll need to upgrade or use an alternative form of ID like a passport. Here's what TSA accepts: real ID driver's license, U.S. passport, passport card, military ID, or permanent resident card. State-issued IDs without real ID compliance are no longer sufficient for air travel. Now, here's something many seniors don't know. If you've forgotten or lost your ID, TSA has a process for that. You won't automatically be denied boarding. You'll go through additional screening, answer identity verification questions, and potentially face delays. But it is possible to fly without ID in an emergency. However, don't rely on that. Make sure your identification is current and real ID compliant well before your trip. The process of upgrading to real ID requires a visit to the DMV with specific documents: birth certificate or passport, proof of social security number, and 2 proofs of residency. So don't wait until the last minute. I've helped countless passengers who showed up with expired IDs or non-compliant licenses, and it's always stressful. Take care of this now, and travel will be so much smoother. Okay, those are my 10 essential TSA rules for senior travelers in 2026. Let's quickly recap the most important points. You may qualify for modified screening at 75 plus. Medical devices and medications have special accommodations. Mobility aids are always allowed and must be handled with care. You have the right to opt out of scanners and request pat-downs. And please, make sure your ID is real ID compliant. Here's my final message to you. Air travel is absolutely still accessible and manageable for seniors. Don't let fear or confusion about TSA rules keep you from visiting family, seeing new places, or living your life. You deserve to travel with dignity and confidence, and now you have the knowledge to do exactly that. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe to the channel. I share insider flight attendant tips every week to make your travel safer, easier, and more comfortable. And let me know in the comments, which of these rules surprised you most? Or do you have a TSA question I didn't cover? Safe travels, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.